Hello everyone and welcome to Lush and Salty Aquariums. My name is Stefan. Thank you for coming to my channel. Standing before the 135 gallon freshwater display tank in the dining room of my apartment in Chicago. That's a little swish pan just to give you a sense of where we're at. This is the only aquarium in my home that is not in my fish room per se. The fish room, incidentally, is just around the corner here from my dining room, but this display tank is out in the public space of my home for all who enter to see, so therefore it is kept to the best of my abilities in terms of its beauty, health, and aesthetic appeal. And hopefully that goes without saying. I mean, I'm pretty proud of this creation. It wasn't easy to get here. In the beginning, I had some bumps in the road, if you will, a number of issues, fatalities, all the things that can happen to a fish keeper, especially when you're just getting started. Now, when I set this tank up, it was a long process after moving back from California to Chicago, and I did it piecemeal, and I'm not going to go into all of that right now. I have in the past, and I certainly can and likely will do that again. There's just a lot to talk about in terms of that. But 2 years into my actually 3 years into my Chicago channel, Lush and Salty 2.0, I wanted to look at all these. I mean, are you kidding me? How beautiful is that? The rainbow fish, you see Bosemani, the Millennium, the big red teacup shaped ones, the underrated dwarf, the praycocks right there with that shimmer. Those are two males, you can tell by the red fins. Got some live bears in here. Of course, the angelfish. The biggest fish in the tank, that Siamese algae eater. The reticulated version, which in my opinion is the most beautiful. And beautiful is a relative term with a fish like that, because they do tend to look just like the fish you might inadvertently catch if you're fishing in a river. So it has sort of a sucker vibe to it, but those that if you see the pectoral and the dorsal fin, that beautiful gold, and then the black spot. Anyway, I digress. What I wanted to talk about, if you haven't picked up on it already, and if I can get past all these fish, is the glorious bloom from that Anubias right there in the background. And since the literal background is black, it just absolutely pops. Now there is, the water isn't crystal clear. My systems don't go for crystal clear, they go for healthy, so there are particulates in the water. And of course there's the fish in the way, and then there's my shoddy filmmaking ability. But all that being said, and look, there's a beautiful porthole right into it. That Anubias, and I think it's the congensis, a very common variety. You could buy it anywhere, and other Anubias will flower for you for sure. Honestly, it's not a particularly rare event. I take it to be a good sign in terms of the overall health, kind of like a canary in a coal mine. But these plants will flower for just about anybody in any number of conditions, and it's hard to pinpoint what those conditions would be, because Anubias, at least most of them to my knowledge, are more marginal plants versus true aquatic plants. The flower itself, and I could be wrong about the science here, but I did do some research, and I have asked these questions before. I've gotten different answers, but according to the internet, the flowers are typically found when the plant is above water, because flowering plants need the atmosphere in order to propagate by way of pollination, etc. Now, one great question I did have for my fellow fish keepers and friends, and I'll ask it again right here. Is it possible for a plant to germinate or propagate underwater the way it would, or somewhat similar to the way it would if it was in the air, in the atmosphere? In other words, in the atmosphere, let's just go ABC here, first grade level science, a bee would come attracted to the nectar from the bloom, get some pollen on its feet, and then bring that pollen to another flower in the same general area or not, and then the act of fertilization would occur. Can something like that happen underwater? And the last time I asked, I believe the answer I got was it's possible that a water bloom like this can in fact propagate if the material, the pollen, found its way to another underwater bloom. But that would take a lot of luck and happenstance, because fish just don't do that job, right? Not to my knowledge, but I think it's fascinating, and I don't have a definitive answer. So if any of you do, and I've heard when I put these questions out there, I did get some intelligent replies from some of you out in FishTube land, and I'm not gonna try and recall quotes or name names, but as I said, the answer was it's possible, maybe, doubtful. Nobody said unequivocally no, but I kind of think it is unequivocally no, because the more I've researched underwater blooms, and you will get them on other plants, particularly epiphytes. Now I'm moving over to this bucephalandra, and you can see some bloom, one here that's about to happen and one here that has happened and is fading. The thing about these blooms, both the Anubias, especially the bucephalandra, is they're very short-lived. So it gives the occurrence a bit of a, that miracle vibe, sort of like, what's that famous stink flower that takes 100 years, it blooms, lasts for like 48 hours, and then's gone for another 100 years. So a little bit of that excitement comes with every single one of these underwater blooms. At least to me it does. There's something extraordinarily beautiful, to get away from the science for a minute. Very rewarding. That famous painter, American painter, Georgia O'Keeffe, captured iconically the sensual nature of, I believe it was cattlilies, but other, similar looking flowers, which are very, there's no getting around it. There's a very sensual, feminine, and I don't want YouTube to hurt me if I use even more descriptive terms, but I think you get where I'm going with this. The anatomy of that bloom, it's just unavoidable. You don't have to be a guy wearing a raincoat in the alley to pick up on the vibe here. There's something very attractive in a feminine way. And I think I've said more than I need to about that. But it's just beautiful, right? Shake up the Etch-a-Sketch, erase all of my gobbledygook, and you're left with, yeah, that's freaking beautiful. And look at that right there. Just free and clear, up on its own, amidst all the organized chaos of this beautiful community tank, this freshwater display full of life, full of plants, obviously full of fish, invertebrates, and all the creatures possible that I could put into an aquarium without pushing it to its max. And many of you will tell me, and I've heard it, that this aquarium has crossed that line. But I take extraordinarily good care of all of my ecosystems. I do push them to their maximum potential. I probably err on the wrong side of being overstocked, and I'm owning that, but I do care tremendously, but I'm also culpable in the sort of more is more. But all of that being said, the solitude, there's just the one bloom, right? And you can't go out and buy a blooming Anubias and put it in your aquarium. It's just never gonna happen that way for you. It has to start like all the other plants, just a green or, version of green. And then over time, one day, you'll see a stem that is behaving differently than the others. It's not going to create a leaf, it's going to create a flower. And that's what we have here. And that's what we have about to happen here and elsewhere in this aquarium. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you watching have had the same phenomenon occur in your fish tanks. And I'm willing to bet it's a highlight for you as well. It's just something, yeah, we take it for granted, but we don't have to. And I'm making this video as a testimony. I'm bearing witness to God's creation by proxy of my creation in delivering this stunning flower, of which I'm not even sure is supposed to happen underwater, but in a controlled ecosystem, the plant doesn't have any choice. The waters aren't going to rise and lower as they would in nature, revealing it on the side of a river. It's always going to be underwater, here about a half a foot, I don't know how many centimeters, but it's below the surface considerably. It's not going to be able to breach the surface. And actually, I've never seen, for me, I know it must happen, but I have not had Anubias or Bucephalandra shoot their stems up and above the water to create flowers. Now, I've had that happen a bunch of times with Echinodoros or the sword plants, and I've even taken some of those advantageous plants, I think they're adventitious, I don't know, I can't say the vocabulary word, but plants and flowers that have been created above water from your sword plant, like this big beauty right here that I just showed you the outcroppings of. I've seen those flowers all day long, twice on Sunday, and I've made the most of it. And Echinodoros is definitely a marginal plant, as happier out of water, in a bog or a swamp, but it shares the same qualities that we've been talking about. But those flowers look more like typical prairie flowers, whereas this flower has that Georgia O'Keeffe, that hypersensual, absolutely, I mean, there's no wonder why she painted over and over again this motif, this occurrence, albeit with a different plant, but a nymphea or a lily nonetheless. And against the colorscape of these fish, framed by black, or I should say framed by all the other green plants with a black backdrop, I mean, it's just a perfect setting. I wish all my family were here to see it, but it's just me and you, and hopefully a whole bunch of you, to take this in with me. I'd love for you to share your experiences with similar phenomenon and tell me what you know about it that I haven't covered or I've gotten wrong, and help me to understand the science about these underwater blooms, and if I was more right or wrong, or just add to the conversation. Okay, everybody, as always, keep your hands in the tank, albeit carefully, and ciao for now.